Hello everyone. Today we are going to learn the most important topic of the female reproductive system, that is the menstrual cycle. So menstrual cycle, it is the most important thing in the woman's life. It basically, the childbearing is mainly based on this, that is the menstrual cycle. So today we will learn about that. Menstrual cycle, it is known as the female reproductive cycle. So it starts from the menarche and it ends at the menopause. So during this years, starting from the menarche to the menopause, the every month the menstrual cycle it continues. So what is menarche? Menarche is the first period of the woman, that is called the menarche. The average age of menarche, it is in the human, that is 12 years, but it ranges from 8 to 16 years. Okay? So 12 years is the normal average age, but nowadays it is early, so it starts from the, in some women, some girls, it starts from the 8 years and it ranges from up to 16 years also. So anytime the menarche age, or you can say first menstruation, begins. So the factors which are responsible for the menarche, that already we have seen earlier also, that is the hereditary, diet, overall health, all that can affect the menarche age. So in some women, malnourished women, or you can say according to the hereditary, it can start delay also. The cessation of the menstruation, that is known as the menopause. So the woman's age, in childbearing age, it starts from the menarche, ends at the menopause. These are the two extremes childbearing age of the women. So towards the end of the puberty, the girls begins to release the egg, which is known as the ovum, okay? And every month it releases. So that monthly period, it is known as the female reproductive cycle or the menstrual cycle. The approximately average duration, average age, average you can say it is the 28 days. So in some women it starts early as 25 days also. In some it extends up to 35 days also. But average is 28 days. So every 28 days during the ovulation, ovary send the tiny egg, which is the ovum, into the fallopian tube. So each month the ovary releases one ovum. Alternatively, one ovary release ovum from each side. So unless the egg is fertilized by the sperm, this egg remains into the fallopian tube, okay, for 2 to 3 days following the ovulation. And if the ovum is not fertilized by the sperm, then this ovum dries and leaves the body 2 weeks later through the vagina, and this process is known as the menstruation. So in the menstruation, along with the ovum, the blood and the tissue, that is from the endometrium, that also combines, and together it forms the menstrual flow. Generally the duration of the menstruation, that is 4 to 7 days. So here the endometrium, mucus and the blood, it descends from the uterus and that creates the menstrual flow. So basically the menstruation, it refers to the monthly discharge through the vagina of blood and other substances from the uterus in a non-pregnant adult woman. Now let's talk about the hormonal regulation of the female reproductive cycle, because this whole cycle, it mainly depends on the hormones. Any increase in the hormone, decrease in the hormone, it changes the women's cycle. So let's talk about the hormones of the female reproductive system. So generally these are the different hormones which are regulating the female reproductive cycle. First one, it is the gonadotropin releasing hormone, which is secreted through the hypothalamus. Then next one, it is the FSH. FSH is follicle stimulating hormone, which is secreted from the pituitary. Then next one is the LH. So LH is luteinizing hormone. Again, it is secreted through the pituitary. Then next hormones are estrogen and the progesterones. Okay. So this estrogen and the progesterone, these are secreted from the ovaries, and the important one, okay, that is the HCG. So HCG, if fertilization occurs, then only this hormone is secreted, that is human chorionic gonadotropin. So these are the hormones which balances the menstrual cycle. Now let's talk about detail one by one each hormone. So first hormone, that is the gonadotropin releasing hormone. That is very important hormone. It is the secreted by the hypothalamus. So gonadotropin releasing hormone is the main hormone. Hypothalamus will secrete the gonadotropin releasing hormone, which will turn pituitary to secrete the FSH and the LH. So it is the main hormone, that is gonadotropin releasing hormone. Now next, the FSH. So FSH is the follicle stimulating hormone. The name suggests it stimulates the follicle. Which follicles? So that are present in the ovaries. So under the influence of the FSH, this ovarian follicle, it grows. Okay. So basically the follicular growth, it is controlled by the follicle stimulating hormone, and the growing follicles, it will secrete the estrogen. So basically FSH, it is mainly plays the role in the development of the follicles and secretion of the estrogen too. The next hormone which is secreted by the anterior pituitary, that is the luteinizing hormone. So this luteinizing hormone, once the follicle is matured by the FSH, now there is a role of the luteinizing hormone. This luteinizing hormone, it further develops the ovarian follicle, and the role in the secretion of the estrogen, and the main important role which is of LH, it is the ovulation. Okay. So what is ovulation? So once the ovum is released, that is known as the ovulation process. So after from the follicle, the mature ovum is released, and that is picked up by the fimbria of the fallopian tube. So this process is known as the ovulation. So this ovulation, it is due to the luteinizing hormone. So, and this luteinizing hormone also, it promotes the formation of the corpus luteum. What is corpus luteum? So corpus luteum is the follicle from which the ovum has been released. So that follicle will change its size and shape, and that is known as the corpus luteum. So this corpus luteum, it stimulates the production of the estrogen, progesterone, releasing in the inhibin hormone. So these are hormones which are released by the corpus luteum under the influence of the luteinizing hormone. So as we talked that next hormone is the estrogen. So this estrogen hormone, it is secreted by the follicles and the corpus luteum also. So what are the follicular cells? Mainly the estrogens are secreted. What are the main role of the estrogen? So this estrogen, first role, that is in the development and the maturation of the female reproductive organs, and also it helps in the bringing the secondary sexual characteristics in the women, especially. So that is the development of the breast, initiation of this menstrual cycle under the influence of the estrogen, endometrial growth will occur. So that is the main secondary sexual characteristics. It is the main role of the estrogen. Then also it increases the protein anabolism. So basically there will be the growth of the breast tissue. Okay, and in the women, the estrogen also plays in important part in the bone development also. Okay, so that due to the lacking of the estrogen, there are chances of the osteoporosis in the women. Then estrogen also helps in maintaining the blood cholesterol level. So that is the reason why women is having lower risk of the heart disease compared to the men, because this estrogen, it keeps the this blood cholesterol level down. And the next function, that is at moderate level of the estrogen, it inhibits the release of the GnRH, FSH and the LH. Especially during the pregnancy, the estrogen level are compared to the normal, it is high. So once the estrogen level are moderate to high, then there is a this GnRH, FSH and LH, this production are inhibited. So that was the estrogen hormone. The second hormone which are secreted by the from the ovary, that is the progesterone hormone. So this progesterone hormone specifically, it is secreted by the corpus luteum, and it acts combinedly with the estrogen hormone. So after the fertilization of the ovum, this progesterone helps in implantation process. 2 to 3 days the ovum will stays into the fallopian tube. Then after that it comes into the uterus. So for that process is known as the implantation. The fertilized ovum embeds itself into the endometrium layer. So progesterone plays the important role. And the high level also inhibit the gonadotropin releasing hormone and the luteinizing hormone. And the last hormone, that is the HCG. HCG is known as the human chorionic gonadotropin hormone. So this HCG, it functions as a similar to the luteinizing hormone, and it rescue the corpus luteum. So if in the body fertilization occur, then only from that fertilized egg the HCG will be secreted. So in the body, if HCG is present, then corpus luteum will continue its function, that is secretion of the estrogen and the progesterone. If HCG is not present, that means if fertilization is not occur, then this corpus luteum will degenerate. So that are the hormones which plays the important role in maintaining the female reproductive cycle. So that we have seen, that is the first is the gonadotropin releasing hormone, then second one is the FSH, LH, estrogen, progesterone and the HCG. Now there are two additional hormones also, that are the relaxin and the inhibin. So these are the additional hormone, relaxin and inhibin. This relaxin are secreted from the corpus luteum, and this relaxin hormone, it relaxes the uterus. So basically its property is muscle relaxin. So it inhibits the contractions of the uterus. So specifically this relaxin hormone, it is important throughout the pregnancy, because in the pregnancy we have to maintain the embryo inside the uterus. So once the contraction will start, the embryo, it will come out, embryo or fetus. So this relaxin hormone is secreted, and that's why the uterus contractions are inhibited, and that maintains the environment of the uterus. And that during the labor, it has also the important function, that during labor it relaxes the symphysis pubis, so that it enlarges the space for the childbirth, and also it dilates the cervix. The next hormone is inhibin. So this inhibin is secreted by the granulosa cells of the follicles, and also it is secreted by the corpus luteum, and the name suggests inhibin. So its function is, it inhibits the release of the FSH and lesser to the luteinizing hormone. So inhibin is secreted, it means the FSH and LH secretion is inhibited. So throughout the pregnancy it is not needed. So that's why in the pregnancy this important hormones will be there, that is relaxin hormone and the inhibin hormone. So that are the physiological effects of this hormone. So firstly, we have seen from the hypothalamus, the gonadotropin releasing hormone will be secreted. It will stimulate the anterior pituitary, which will secrete the FSH and LH. So this FSH will stimulate the follicles, and it will promote the growth of the ovarian follicles. Then FSH also stimulates the ovary, and also it will be secretion of the estrogen, progesterone and the inhibin. Okay. Then this LH is secreted. So this LH, the important function of the LH is the ovulation. So from the ovaries, the graphene follicle, the ovum will be released, that is due to the luteinizing hormone. Then second function, this LH will act on the corpus luteum, and this corpus luteum also it will secrete the progesterone, estrogen, relaxin and the inhibin hormone. Now, these four hormones, these are secreted by the ovaries, or you can say follicles, and the corpus luteum, that are the estrogen, progesterone, relaxin, and the inhibin. Estrogen, the main function, that is the development of the female reproductive structures, secondary sexual characteristics, then increase the protein anabolism, lower blood cholesterol, and inhibit the release of the GnRH, FSH, and the LH. The progesterone function, basically it is important role in the implantation. Then it also prepares the mammary gland for the secretion of the milk, and also it inhibits the secretion of the GnRH and the LH. This relaxin hormone, it relaxes the uterus, it prevents the contractions, okay? And during labor, it dilates the pelvis, and also it dilates the cervix also. And inhibit the release of the FSH and the LH. So that was the hormonal control of the female reproductive system. Now let's talk about the actual female reproductive cycle. So there are basically two cycles in the female reproductive cycle or menstrual cycle. One is the ovarian cycle, and second one is the menstrual cycle, or you can say uterine cycle. So what is ovarian cycle? So ovarian cycle, that is events that occurs in the ovaries, that is during and after the maturation of the oocyte. So that events are covered under the ovarian cycle. And second one, the uterine cycle, that includes the concurrent changes in the endometrium, okay? And that prepares the endometrium for the implantation till the birth. So these events are covered under the uterine cycle. So there are two cycles independently, you can say. One is the ovarian cycle and second one is the uterine cycle. There are four phases of the menstrual cycle, which is a very important thing. Okay? Four phases. First phase, it is the menstrual phase. Second one is the pre-ovulatory phase. Third one is the ovulation phase. And fourth one is the post-ovulatory phase. The average is 28 days. Average length of the menstrual cycle is 28 days. So this 28 days are divided among these four phases. The menstruation phase lasts from 1st day to 5th day. Then pre-ovulatory phase, it lasts from the 6 to 13 days. Then ovulation phase is only 1 day, that is the 14th day around. And the post-ovulation phase from the 15 to 28 days, it is known as the post-ovulatory phase. So let's see what happens in these phases in detail. So first phase, that is the menstruation phase. Menstruation phase, that refers to the menses. Menses meaning is the month. So this phase lasts from the first 5 days each month. So once the menstruation phase starts, you can say the new reproductive cycle has begun. So that is the first phase of the menstrual cycle, the menstruation phase. What happens in the ovary during the menstruation phase? So there are usually 20 follicles, okay? So 20 secondary follicles. So that continues to enlarge. And these follicles that are filled by the fluid from the granulosa cells, and that or you can say oozing from the blood, so it enlarges, the follicle enlarges. And this every follicle there will be oocyte, but one follicle under the influence of the follicle stimulating hormone, one follicle it will enlarge more compared to the other, and in that oocyte mature ovum will be there. During the menstruation phase, what happens in the uterus? So basically in the uterus there will be shedding of the endometrium. So the flow of the menstrual flow, it is ranges from the 50 to 150 ml. Okay? And here the ovarian hormone, that is estrogen, okay, progesterone, usually there will be in the starting it will be decline. So there will be decline of the hormone. Then during the menstruation phase the estrogen will increase. So here there will be release of the prostaglandin during the menstruation phase from the uterus. So this prostaglandin, it will constrict the arteries, and so that the oxygen supply will be deprived from these cells, and these cells start to die, or you can say the cells start to shedding. So this entire stratum functionalis, it sludges off. There are two layers of the endometrium, which we have already talked about in the uterus histology. So here in the endometrium, two layers, that is stratum basalis and stratum functionalis. So from the stratum basalis, there is a new functional stratum functionalis. Every month it grows. So that stratum functionalis, during the menstruation phase, it sludges off. So at this time the endometrium will be very thin. The measurement is usually 2 to 5 mm, because here after the menstruation finishes, only the stratum basalis layer will be intact. So the menstrual flow passes from the uterine cavity through the cervix to the vagina and from the exterior. So that was the menstruation phase. Now next phase, that is the second phase, it is known as the pre-ovulatory phase. So this pre-ovulatory phase, the other name of the pre-ovulatory phase, it is the follicular phase. So this pre-ovulatory phase, it ranges from, you can say, it ends of the menstruation to the ovulation period. These days are known as the pre-ovulatory phase. So that days are from the 6th day to the 13th day of the women's cycle. So what happens in the ovaries during this phase? So this estrogen and inhibin will be secreted, okay? And that in turn it will decrease the secretion of the FSH. Now after the menstruation phase, in the menstruation phase the follicle stimulating hormone will increase, and after the menstruation phase, the pre-ovulatory phase, the estrogen is rising, and that is why the estrogen and inhibin is secreted, and that is why the follicle stimulating hormone, it will decline. Okay. So one follicle, it will become the mature, and which will known as the Graphene follicle. Okay, so that follicle is mature follicle, and it continues to enlarge, okay, and the diameter till 20 mm, the enlarged diameter will be there, and that follicle is now ready for the ovulation process. Okay. So it will bulge like blister, and from that ovulation will be there. So that follicle is the Graphene follicle. And with the reference of the ovarian cycle, the menstrual and the pre-ovulatory phase together, it termed as the follicular phase, because from the menstruation phase, the ovarian follicle continues the development until the pre-ovulatory phase, it develops. So together in the ovarian cycle, together these two phases are termed under the follicular phase. And after that, at the end of, you can say, pre-ovulatory phase, the luteinizing hormones are increases. So these are the development of the follicles. Secondary follicle will be there. Then under the influence of the FSH, it will mature, and the mature follicle is known as the Graphene follicle. It will bulge like blister, and from that the ovum will be released, which is known as the ovulation. Now the third phase of the menstrual cycle, which is known as the second phase, there is a again in the events of the uterus. So in the event of the uterus, the proliferative phase, the estrogen level is increases, as we have already seen in the events in the ovaries. So this estrogen level increases in the blood, and the stratum basalis, okay, that is the inner layer, it starts dividing, okay, and proliferation of the new stratum functionalis layer will be starting in this phase. So it is known as the proliferative phase. Proliferative means there will be proliferation of the endometrium from the basalis layer. So this arteries, spiral arteries, it will penetrate into the stratum functionalis layer, and the thickness of the endometrium layer, it doubles, that is 4 to 10 mm. So this is why it is known as the proliferative phase. So you can say the pre-ovulatory phase, it is also known as the follicular phase. That is because the follicles are developing into the ovaries, and the pre-ovulatory phase, it is known as the proliferative phase, because the endometrium proliferation occurs in this phase. The third phase, that is the ovulation. So the ovulation, that is known as the rupture of the mature follicle and the release of the oocyte into the pelvic cavity, and this typically occurs in the 14th day in the average menstrual cycle. So ovulation day is the 14th day. So here there will be positive feedback of the estrogen, okay? And we will learn about later on the what is positive feedback and the negative feedback system. So here the estrogen, okay, it increases, and the GnRH, LH and FSH, it will decrease. Okay. The LH, it will increase at the ovulation phase, and afterwards, after the ovulation phase, it decreases. So LH is mainly plays important role in the ovulation. So this LH, it causes the rupture of the Graafian follicle and expulsion of the oocyte about 9 hours after the peak of the LH. So around the 12th day, 11th or 12th day of the menstrual cycle, the LH surge occurs. LH surge means LH will reach to the peak level. That is known as the LH surge. So because of this LH surge, around 12th day, after the LH surge, after the 9 hours of the LH surge, there will be rupture of this oocyte, and that process is known as the ovulation. So ovulation is typically a one-day process, and from the due to the ovulation, sometimes there is a blood leaks into the pelvic cavity from the ruptured follicle, and which causes the pain. So in some women can experience the ovulation process because due to the pain in the pelvic cavity. And this clots, okay, they are absorbed, and this known as that follicle is now, it will turn into the corpus luteum. So this is the ovulation process. Firstly, there will be high level of the estrogen, okay, from the follicle. Follicle, okay. It will stimulate the release of the LH. GnRH will increase, and in turn it will increase the LH, and then GnRH promotes the FSH LH, okay, in the anterior pituitary, and this LH surge, it will cause the ovulation. So this from the mature Graafian follicle, the ovum will be released, and the bleeding will occur, okay, and that bleeding, sometimes it will enter into the pelvic cavity, causes the pain, and this ruptured follicle, it will turn into the corpus luteum. This bleeding follicle, it is known as the corpus hemorrhagicum. And the last phase of the menstrual cycle, which is known as the post-ovulatory phase. So this post-ovulatory phase, the other name, it is the luteal phase. After the ovulation till the next cycle begins, this phase is known as the post-ovulatory phase. So from the 15th day to the 28th days, this post-ovulatory phase lasts. Now what happens in the post-ovulatory phase in the ovary and the uterus? So in the ovary, so each month one ovary will be functioning. So alternatively, every month the alternative ovary will be functioning. So in one ovary, basically there will be one ovary will be stimulated by the LH, okay? And due to that, the corpus luteum will secrete the progesterone, estrogen, relaxin and inhibin. These 4 hormones are secreted by the corpus luteum. So if there are 2 cases here, one, that is ovum is fertilized after the ovulation, and second case, if ovum is not fertilized. So let's see the first scenario, if the ovum is fertilized. If ovum is not fertilized. So if ovum is not fertilized, the corpus luteum has lifespan of only 2 weeks. If ovum is not fertilized, HCG will not be secreted from the fertilized ovum, and so in turn this corpus luteum will degenerate. So corpus luteum degenerates into the corpus albicans. Now the levels of the progesterone, estrogen, inhibin, all it will decrease. So corpus luteum will degenerate and this hormones will decrease. So in turn these hormones are decreased. So the GnRH, FSH and LH, these hormones are increasing. Okay? So that is known as the negative feedback system. So this ovarian hormones are suppressed. In turn, hypothalamus will secrete the FSH, GnRH hormone, and FSH and LH are secreted by the pituitary gland. Now, second case, if the secondary oocyte is fertilized, so there will be production of the HCG hormone, that is human chorionic gonadotropin hormone. So this HCG will rescue the corpus luteum. So this corpus luteum will continue the secretory activity of the estrogen, progesterone, relaxin and inhibin, and this fertilized ovum is implanted, which will turn into the pregnancy 40 weeks. So in that this hormones will be continued its secretion. Initially these hormones are secreted by the corpus luteum. Later on, once the placenta is developed, these hormones are secreted by the placenta. Now during this phase, what happens into the uterus? So under the influence of the progesterone in the estrogen, the growth of the endometrial gland occurs. Already the functional layer, it is prepared by the estrogen. Now there is a role of the progesterone. So this progesterone, it will stimulate the growth of the endometrial gland, secretory glands. So it will secrete the glycogen secretion and it will again become thick and the secretory. And the size of this, that is 12 to 18 mm. So this, because of the secretory activity of this gland, this period is called as the secretory phase. If fertilization does not occur after the corpus luteum degenerates, the estrogen and progesterone declines, and this endometrium, okay, it will sludge, and that is known as the menstruation. So due to the inhibition or withdrawal level of the estrogen and progesterone, this prepared endometrium, it sludges off. So let's talk about the feedback system, okay, positive feedback and the negative feedback system. So initially there is the hypothalamus, which secretes the gonadotropin releasing hormone. Then this gonadotropin releasing hormone, it will stimulate the anterior pituitary, and anterior pituitary will secrete the FSH and the LH. The follicle stimulating hormone acts on the follicles, follicular growth. The LH basically again it helps in the follicular growth and it main role in the ovulation. Then this LH will stimulate the ovarian follicles and the corpus luteum to secrete the estrogen and the progesterone. So this estrogen, initially estrogen will build the stratum functionalis layer, and the progesterone, it will add the secretory activity in the endometrium. So this both, it will prepare the uterus for the fertilization. So if there is a continuation secretion of the estrogen and progesterone, it means if there is a pregnancy, if there is a fertilized ovum, then there will be continuous secretion of the estrogen and progesterone. So that is known as the positive feedback system. And basically this hormones, that is this hormones, okay, hypothalamus and pituitary hormones, these are basically suppressed. Now if there is the estrogen and progesterone is not secreted, then it will stimulate the hypothalamus and the anterior pituitary. So that is a negative feedback. There are suppression of this estrogen and progesterone hormone, that is known as the negative feedback. So in most of the cycles there will be negative feedback, the suppression of the ovarian hormones, that are estrogen and progesterone, which will in turn it will stimulate the hypothalamus to release the gonadotropin releasing hormone, and it will stimulate the pituitary to continue the secretion of the FSH and LH, and so that this menstrual cycle continues. So That is the basically the what we have seen. Okay, so let's take a glance. So that is the hypothalamus. Okay, it will secrete the gonadotropin releasing hormone from the anterior lobe. FSH and LH are secreted. Okay, then at this FSH, this is responsible for the growth and the growth of the follicles. Okay, then there will be maturation of the graphene follicle. Okay, and it will secrete the ovarian hormones, that is the estrogen, okay, and the inhibin. Okay. Then LH is responsible for the ovulation. After the ovulation, there will be formation of the corpus luteum, and if this corpus luteum is degenerates, it turns into the corpus albicans. So this is the formation of the follicles. Now after the corpus luteum, there will be secretion of the progesterone and the estrogen. Okay, so that progesterone, it prepares the endometrium, and this estrogen, it proliferates the endometrium. Progesterone adds the secretory activity. Okay, and then inhibin will be secreted, so it will secrete the synthesis of the FSH and the LH. Okay, and if this corpus luteum is not continued, there will be corpus albicans. So this there will be no secretion of the estrogen and the progesterone, so it results in the menstruation process. So that is a negative feedback system. Okay, and if there is a continuation secretion, it will result in the positive feedback system. So to gather all these activities, okay, that is in the one, that is initially the follicular growth will be there. The one follicle will become the most dominant, that is known as the graphene follicle. From the graphene follicle, under the influence of the LH, the ovulation will occur. It will then, these follicle will turn into the corpus luteum, and if it degenerates, it turns into the corpus albicans. This around the time of the ovulation, that is important point, that in the woman there will be rise of the basal body temperature. So you can see here, around the time of the ovulation, this corpus luteum, okay, this corpus luteum, basically there will be increase of the basal body temperature from after the ovulation. So that is the basal body temperature. All the hormone comparison is given here. So in the menstruation phase, generally the hormones are declining. Okay, all hormones will be suppressed. Then after that, there will be increased in the FSH. Okay, so follicle stimulating hormone, it will increase. Estrogen will increase. Okay, so it will prepare the endometrium. Follicle stimulating hormone prepares the follicles. Then around the time of the ovulation, there is a peak level of the luteinizing hormone, which is known as the LH surge. And after that, the follicle stimulating hormone and the luteinizing hormone, it will decrease. And after the ovulation, the progesterone comes into the main role, so that it prepares the endometrium for the secretory activity. So there are in the uterus, in the menstruation, there will be shedding of the endometrium layer. Then after that, under the influence of the progesterone and estrogen, there will be preparation of the endometrium, stratum functionalis layer, and after that, progesterone adds the secretory activity. So that is known as the secretory phase. So that is the 28-day cycle of the women. So this basically the phases. Okay, during the premenstrual phase, basically it will be endometrium will be in the highest level. Then during menstruation it decreases, and in the post menstruation again it will increase. Now if we talk about the fertile days, so around the time of the ovulation, that are the highest fertile days in the 28 days of the women's cycle. So first 8 days, that is first 5 days, are the menstruation phase, and then after that in the follicular phase, up to the 8th. Okay, because in the some women the ovulation occurs earlier. So that around the time of the ovulation that are not the safe days. So after that, around 9 to 15, it is considered as the fertility phase. Then after, once the ovulation occur, the ovum remains only for 24 hours. The lifespan of ovum is only 24 hours, and during this time, if sperm comes into the contact, then only the fertilization process occurs. Otherwise, if sperm doesn't come into the contact, then after the 1 day, that is after the 24 hours, the ovum degenerates. So after that, these are again the safe days. Okay, so that is basically the secretory phase, or you can say the post ovulatory phase. It is now considered as the safe days. So let's summarize the topic. Today we have seen the menstrual cycle, that is known as the female reproductive cycle, or you can say it is also known as the sexual cycle, which has the 4 phases. So in the woman's body, now around the time of the ovulation, there is an important point that the body temperature, it will increase around the time of the ovulation. So that it will slightly increase, that is 0.5 centigrade. So if woman measures continuously, that is the temperature, so she can know her ovulation period, that is after the ovulation 0.5 centigrade it will increase. Now this hormones, so if we talk about the first 5 days, okay, that is the menstruation phase. In that, slightly the follicle stimulating hormones, it will increase, little estrogen will increase, so it will then it will prepare the endometrium. After that, then in the menstruation phase there will be shedding of the endometrium. Then after that, during the follicular phase, there will be follicular growth, and again there will be estrogen, it will increase. The follicle stimulating hormone, it will decrease. The progesterone is in a plateau stage. Okay, so progesterone in the plateau stage, and main important function that LH. So this LH surge occurs before the time of the ovulation, and due to the LH surge, the LH reaches the peak level, so it ruptures the follicle, it results in the ovulation, and after that LH also decreases. And after the ovulation phase, the progesterone, it comes into the main role, it prepares the endometrium, its secretory activity, it is given by the progesterone. So in the endometrium, that is before the ovulation, before the menstruation, there is a premenstrual phase. In that, mainly the lining of the endometrium will be in the highest. Then next will be menstruation phase, so that is the shedding of the endometrium. Then there is a post menstruation phase, that is the building of the new endometrium layer. So if we talk about the average cycle of the woman, that is 28 days, the fertile and the safe days. So 14th day is the ovulation phase. Around that days that are not considered as the safer days, because the ovum will be there, and if the sperm comes into the contact, definitely the fertilization process will be there. So initially this 1 to 8 days, they are considered as the most safest days, because during the menstruation phase there will not be ovum. Obviously after that there will not be ovum. So around after that, in some women it is not on the 14th day, in some women it can be earlier also. So from the 9th to 15th day, they are the fertile days. So in that usually the ovum will be there. After the ovulation, ovum stays only 1 day, that is the lifespan of ovum, it is 24 hours. And if during this phase, that is ovulatory, after 1 day the sperm comes into the contact, there will be fertilization process. The lifespan of the sperm, that is the 3 days. So if before the ovulation day also if sperm will be into the fallopian tube, then also definitely the fertilization process will occur. So this after and before ovulation, that are most fertile days, and around this 9 to 15, these are also considered as the fertile day, because in some cases it will be earlier also. After that, that is from the 16 to up to 28 days, that are the usually the secretory phase, and that are considered as the safer days. So let's summarize the topic. So first phase, that is the menstrual phase in the reproductive cycle, that lasts for 1 to 5 days, and here there will be drop in the ovarian hormone, that is estrogen and the progesterone. Here the endometrium shedding occurs. Then second phase that we have seen, that is the proliferative phase, that lasts for 5 to 13 days. In that the follicle stimulating hormone and the estrogen, that is the main prominent follicle stimulating hormone, prepares the follicles, and the estrogen prepares the endometrium. Then third phase, that is the ovulation phase, that is only 1 day, that is the 14th day, and mainly the rupture of the Graafian follicle and ovulation occurs. And the last phase, that is the secretory phase, also known as the luteal phase. It lasts for 15 to 28 days. In that, the mainly after the LH secretion, the corpus luteum is formed, and corpus luteum will secrete the progesterone. Endometrium will be thickened, and if the fertilization does not occur, then this corpus luteum, it will turn into the corpus albicans, and there will be drop in the estrogen and the progesterone level. So that is all about menstrual cycle that we have seen. So thank you all.